Hi, it's Ross Rosenberg. I'm doing something that's a little bit unconventional for me. I am reposting an older video with little to no changes. But let me be clear. The content is so important and has come up in so many conversations between me and other therapists, my clients. I've come to understand that the way that we respond to our thoughts, our feelings, our beliefs, and sometimes what I call the inner voices in our head is representative of our mental health. If we are healthy, please listen clearly, because I wish the whole world would understand this and of course agree with me. My definition of healthy is not the absence of problems, but is the ability to manage them through internal resources, yourself, and if not, external resources, seeking help from a professional. So if someone is healthy, the thoughts, the inner dialogue is theirs. It represents the sum total of their experiences, emotions, and all the influences and impact on it. But if someone is not, has self-love deficit disorder, which is my updated term for codependency, and they're self-love deficient, or an SLD, my updated term for codependent, they're going to respond to the internal dialogue, believe it's their own thoughts, and be limited, be punished, be humiliated, be shamed. And what I've learned over the last couple years since originally posting this video is that this type of dysfunctional inner dialogue not only comes from the relationship with a pathological narcissist that SLDs experience, more importantly, it comes from our childhood. And I call that foundational gaslighting. It's the gaslighting that occurs during the attachment phase of a child's upbringing, the attachment trauma of being raised by pathological narcissists. It is that process of trying to mold themselves into the good child, the special child, the trophy child, the invisible child. And in my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, I have a chapter that addresses not only the narcissist parent fantasy, but I have a following part where it talks about how the child who's going to be an SLD adapts to it. So the adaptation to the attachment trauma results in gaslighting, which essentially is that your original thoughts, beliefs, ideas about something are changed and swapped out with another person's version of what you should think and what you should feel for the purpose of controlling you. So if you've heard this video before, give it another watch, and I believe you'll see that, much like myself, it might have even more applicability the second time. If you haven't seen it, I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that you derive guidance, perhaps tools, but at the very least, understanding. So thank you, and keep in touch. But tonight we are talking about how the gaslighting that these narcissists have perpetrated on self-love deficient or codependent victims, how it impacts their thinking, and how with this distorted, broken thought patterns, the messages that the gaslighters implant in the SLD's mind, they get mistaken for the SLD's thoughts. And I've often wondered why so many times my clients will be so mad at themselves. They'll be so angry. They will be so hurt. And they'll talk to me about it. They'll say, I'm so stupid. I'm so thoughtless. I'm selfish. Or what has actually become very commonplace, I'm a narcissist. And they share with me their thinking. They berate themselves. They beat themselves up. And then I talk to them and I say, why are you so hard on yourself? Why don't you try to be a little bit more compassionate? And they say, but you don't understand. And they say, and they try to convince me what's wrong with them. And then I ask them, I go, these thoughts that you get, these thoughts that you have, what exactly are they? And so what we will do is we will write them down. And, they'll tell me, I'm not pretty enough. I'm too tall. I'm too short. Not smart enough. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. My skin is too light. My skin is too dark.
I'm annoying. Um, I'm I'm too anxious. I'm too depressed. And so we go through all of these thoughts that they have that are constantly cycling through their head about what's wrong with them. And so then I ask them, whose voice is that in your head? And they say, of course it's mine. Of course it's my voice. And then I suggest to them, is there a chance that these voices you hear, these criticisms, these constant degrading, self-evaluating, destructive comments, is it possible that maybe it's not your voice? And people look at me kind of like, what? What are you talking about? I said, but I want you to consider that. Because what would you say if I told you that when you call yourself stupid, or when you call yourself unlovable, or if you call yourself narcissistic or selfish, what would I say to you that if someone, that was really a narrative that a gaslighter introduced into your life a long time ago, that you heard so often that you identified with it. You started to see the truth of it. And then all of a sudden, over a period of years, you started to say it yourself. What would you say if I told you that they weren't your thoughts? And of course, people kind of look at me kind of dumbfounded, like, what? That's kind of strange. I said, well, think about that. Where did you first hear in your life? And I asked them, remember, when you were younger, how old were you when you first heard that you were selfish? Every time that you wanted something for yourself. Where and when did you hear that? And my clients will be thoughtful about it, and I'll do some of my regressive techniques and my Codependency Cure therapy techniques, and I'll help them get back to a younger age. I remember hearing about that when I was, say, 5 or 6, or sometimes we'll say 7 or 8. And so what I'll do in psychotherapy is I will lead them, regress them back to a time of their childhood, and I'll say, who said to you that you're stupid, that you're thoughtless, that you're going to be always a disappointment? And they almost invariably will trace it back to the narcissistic parent, or someone in the family who the narcissistic parent or the codependent parent or the SLD parent did not protect. So in these instances, I'm able to identify the thought, the negative thought, the derogatory, demeaning, the deflating thought of what's wrong with that person, and the thought that they think is theirs. I'm able to trace it back to some time in their childhood. Someone kept telling them that so often, they proved it to them. They manipulated the environment, which is easy to do when you're a child, so that child grew up thinking that what the parents said was true about themselves. They must be a disappointment. They must be only good or likable when they don't cry. They must be only good or likable when they only get A's, or when they take care of their siblings and act like a parent when they're only a child. And when they don't, or they defy, or they stand up, then they are called selfish, ungrateful. And when you can identify in your childhood where those messages first came from, and tie those messages into your own self-appraisal, your own thoughts about yourself, then we can move forward from the understanding that your thoughts about yourself, they're not your thoughts. They're someone else's voice. So in creating the idea for this video, I came up with disidentifying with the voices in your head, understanding how gaslighting affects your thinking. So let me go through the definition of gaslighting, because this is a very subtle form of gaslighting, and that's what I've done in my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. I actually have
In this version, I actually have a chapter just on gaslighting. And I also, in the chapter on the origins of codependency, I talk about how gaslighting as a child impacts the child's lack of self-esteem, lack of self-love, and eventually the cause of what will become codependency, or in the case of some children, narcissism. So first of all, let me define gaslighting. And then I will show you how that applies to the child who grows up with a narcissistic parent and a codependent parent, and how it applies to their attachment trauma. And then I will make the connection between the attachment trauma and how that moves forward into adult self-love deficit disorder, and how these voices get mistaken for your own. So gaslighting is the systematic manipulation of someone's environment in order to make them believe something about themselves that is not true, never was true, or to make them believe something about themselves that is a mild or moderate condition, but to make them believe it's a horrible condition, an incurable condition. The gaslighter, by manipulating the environment, by tricking them, by setting them up, by turning people against them, by constantly telling them over and over again, this is who you are, the child is very vulnerable. An infant, a toddler, a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, a teenager. Children are very vulnerable. So the type of gaslighting that happens in a child's life at the hands of the pathological narcissist is so much more insidious, and so much more insidious, I think is the best word, so much more insidious than the gaslighting that happens with an adult narcissist who is trying to gaslight their adult codependent SLD. The child grows up assuming that the parents are going to tell them the truth about who they are. And when that parent constantly tells them, you're bad when you don't make me happy, you're disappointing when you let me down, you're beautiful when you make me happy, you're so sweet when you take care of your brothers, don't cry, boys don't cry, don't be angry. Ungrateful children are angry. So when you are brought up in an environment where you look to your parents to teach you what is true and what is not, the parents are supposed to introduce reality and then prove to the child that reality is correct. So a normal, healthy parent would say, when you smile, you are beautiful, and I love you so much. And when you don't smile, you're still beautiful, but sometimes you're a little bit hard to handle, but I still love you, and I love you no matter what. So the child grows up with a narrative that I'm beautiful no matter what, although I might be a little bit more annoying when I'm in a bad mood. And I think parents, I think we have a responsibility to tell our children, when they behave well and when they don't behave well. But the child who's brought up by gaslighting parents, whether it's a narcissistic, codependent, or both, they are receiving messages about themselves that are based upon how the parent feels about them. And the child learns who they are through the reactions of their parents. And when their parents are always mad at them because they can't do something well, they start to identify that there's something wrong with themselves. So think of it as a mirror. When a parent is unconditionally loving and accepting, and the child makes a mistake, and they look at the parent and they feel love from that parent, and you use this mirror concept, they feel lovable. The way the parent projects their relationship to the child, the way the parent communicates their relationship to the child, the way the parent communicates the child's worth to them, is like the child looking at a mirror. The child gets to see himself. When that parent looks disappointed, disgusted, the child sees himself as disappointing and disgusting. And I've said this so many times, and in my book, children who are to become SLDs or codependent are hypervigilant. They can at a very early age, they can read their environment They are future psychotherapists. They are future nurses. They are future helpers and sacrificers. They can see everything because they have learned that if you don't watch your environment really carefully, something bad's going to happen. And so when their parent is upset at them, and then they hear their parent say something, they will try to modify their behavior in order to get the best of their parent. That in itself is essentially the cause of codependency. But in this childhood, when you hear over and over again statements of your worth or lack of worth, and it's not based upon reality, and you don't have any other evidence of what reality is, you're going to believe what your parents say to you. And if they say to you, you're lovable because you're just lovable, you get a chance to have self-love as an adult. But if you hear that your lovability is contingent upon how you make them feel, or if you don't upset them, or if you don't make them happy, and it is impossible as a child to keep your parent happy. It takes incredible mental and psychological gymnastics to make your parent happy. You have to learn to control your behaviors and your thoughts. And if you should make a mistake, you're going to hear about it. And those statements, if you're a child who is going to be an SLD when you grow up, that means you are trying your best to be lovable and likable, and you're trying to be invisible. You're trying to be the perfect child, the trophy child, the child that brings the family pride, the child that doesn't cause any problems. You're going to take what you hear about yourself and you're going to try to modify yourself as much as you can so you can fit the narrow definition of what a good child is in the mind of a narcissist. And if they tell you something about yourself, you're going to internalize that. And you're going to know that you either are that and there's no way to change it, or you're going to do your best to not change it. So going back to where I started, so I'm with a client, and the client is saying, I'm such an idiot. I'm so thoughtless. I can't believe that, I met this person and I said something and I disappointed him. And then I asked, so whose voice is that in your head? And they, of course, just as a review, they said, well, that's my voice. That's me. And then I take them back and I regress them using my Codependency Cure, self-love recovery treatment methods, and we go back to their childhood and we identify that voice coming from their parent. This is the disidentification process that I talk about. Understanding that the voices in your head where you are critical, you are hurtful, you are hopeless, and you identify yourself as this person, it's not you. And I know that might be really hard to wrap your arms around. That the person you think you are, the critical person you think you are, the sad person you think you are, might just be because you were so gaslit as a child, someone else's version of you was introduced to your mind so early when you were so vulnerable and defenseless, you accepted that version. And you've been carrying that version ever since. And when you, as an adult, somehow get triggered to feeling some element of self-love deficiency, and you start having your negative thoughts, what's happening is you are speaking the voice of the gaslighting parent. And we should stop that. And it's not easy to stop. And this video presentation, the goal of it is not to teach you how to stop it, because that takes psychotherapy. In fact, there is a whole science, a branch of psychotherapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which actually believes and espouses that we can change our feelings and behaviors if we change our thoughts. If we change our thoughts, we can change our behaviors. And what I'm saying is CBT connecting to attachment trauma psychotherapy. understanding the thoughts and understanding the impact of our thoughts and how much they can keep us from ever finding our true self, our true identity, our true worth, and how our thoughts keep pounding us down into that version of that person that we never were. We are not that person that hates ourselves, that feels bad about ourselves. That person was introduced to us at such an early age. We bought it. We bought it like any other gaslit victim. We bought it because we were so young and defenseless. We didn't know it was real, and we keep perpetrating that same abuse and gaslighting on ourselves. So I ask you guys, when you start beating yourself up, when you start calling yourself names, when you start feeling hopeless, I want you to disidentify that voice. I want you to name that voice. Whose voice is that? Where did that voice come from? And if you can find the origins of that, you're going to find out it's not you. And I'm going to ask you, and it will be hard, and you'll probably need psychotherapy, is to be kind to yourself, is to be gentle to yourself, is to love yourself. Because to change the way you were thinking based upon attachment trauma, it's not easy. It's not as easy as CBT, of just having a different thought. It's understanding your life has been a train wreck. And the people that were supposed to make you love yourself implanted ideas about how bad you were for the purpose of making them feel better. And you took that forward because of the human magnet syndrome and found people in your life that are going to be just like that, who are continuing the gaslighting and reinforcing of those messages. And that voice where you keep beating yourself down isn't yours. So I ask you to stop it. And at least if you can't stop it, be gentle. You might want to know why this impacts me so much. Because I can feel myself get activated. I can feel the emotions kind of surge inside of me as I talk about this. I actually feel very emotional talking to you about this. It's because I know this. And I work on it. And I still find myself having moments where I struggle with it, and I'm ahead of it. And thank God, thank my therapist, thank me, I'm ahead of it. I feel really good about myself. I am in a really good self-loving spot. But it was not easy to change the voices in my head, to reattribute them, to disidentify those to another person and not mine, and to start building a life around self-love abundance where new voices can come in. My voice, the voices of people that loved me. So I say to you guys, as a brother in this fraternity, that this family of self-love recovering community, is that we can do this together, and we can feed off of each other's desire to break the spell of self-love deficit disorder and finally feel good about ourselves with self-love abundance. And I hope that this video and the introduction to the idea that your self-hating, self-defacing, negative, derogatory thoughts aren't really yours. And if they're not yours, maybe you can neutralize them and stop them and maybe implant self-loving messages. So with that, I say, I hope this helped you. I hope this gives you hope. And maybe it taught you something also. If you're interested more in my material, because this is my job and it's how I make a living, please consider buying my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. Consider going to my retreat. We have retreats every 3 months. They're 3-day intensive, life-changing, experiential retreats, and they're in the Chicago area. And all of my materials and services are located at selfloverecovery.com. The company is Self Love Recovery Institute, and the website is selfloverecovery.com. Okay, so guys, I'm going to wrap up. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I say this and I mean it. I'm nothing without you guys. I mean, I needed a purpose in this life. And when I was 17, I was just like a lot of you young SLDs. I was lost and broken, and I had this idea that one day when I grow up, I want to like help people. I want to change the world. And like, by the way, most therapists start off as SLDs. And I had this dream that I actually wanted to change this world, and I wanted to make a difference. And the fact that, you know, my success with my books and, you know, with YouTube and with you guys, how satisfying this is, and I couldn't do it without you guys. So the love that you have for me is equal to the love I have for you. And I'm going to work really hard to keep you educated and supported. And I wish all of you the very best. And I hope that you can keep the uphill fight and not ever give up on the prize. You are worth self-love. You always were worth it. And don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. So be well. And I look forward to the next time we get a chance to connect. Bye-bye.